Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari.
And I'm Garret Schellenhammer.
Hey Garret, welcome back. What movie are we overanalyzing this week?
Ugly Dolls.
Directed by Kelly Asbury, Ugly Dolls stars Kelly Clarkson, Janelle Monae, Nick Jonas, Pitbull, and Blake Shelton as the Ugly Dolls, who confront what it means to be different, struggle with the desire to be loved, and ultimately discover who they truly are and what matters most. So, coming off of High Life, what did we think of Ugly Dolls?
I absolutely love this movie. I take your kids to go see it today. Kids, adults, I don't care. It was such a good movie. And I think you're right. Coming off of High Life, anything had to be better. But I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this movie.
Me too. Because I just was like, I was just so happy to not be in some sort of dark, dreary world that everybody's so serious, and I was like, oh, this is so nice, this is so refreshing. I'm so happy to just see a kids movie,
and a kids movie that was done really well. I felt like the plot was deep enough that it had an internal meaning, but it was not so heavy that kids didn't want to pay attention. I was in the theater with a bunch of kids, and kids really were into it. They were emoting at the right parts, and they were still with it. And I think sometimes in kid movies we just get lost and kids get bored and they don't want to pay attention. This really was captivating, I felt like, to children and their parents too. And just the discussions, even leaving the theaters, listening to these parents with these kids, I was just blown away by how well I enjoyed this movie.
I loved the animation. I mean, this is an animated movie, and I just thought the Uglyville town that they created was so cute and had all these just small touches. There's a scene where this little lobsterish ugly doll is washing a window, and then someone jumps right through it as there is no glass, and it shrugs and just goes back to washing a window. There were a lot of little tiny elements in the animated world which I thought were just really cute and really made the most of the medium. And I really liked, they did this whole sort of makeover montage, which was sort of the anti-makeover montage, which I thought was pretty cute. It didn't get any play from critics, but basically, I mean, it's not the first time ever this has been done for sure, but the idea of the makeover montage is to make the Ugly Dolls look like everybody else. And the song is really upbeat and kind of a happy tune. But the words are actually terrible. It's stuff everything about you and down inside and put on this front so that you look like everybody else. But sung like a pop song. Yeah.
And I think that was what was so interesting to me. I mean, besides the star-studded cast, there was also Charlie XCX, Lizzo.
That's right.
I'm forgetting her name. But everyone in the movie who was an actor was also a singer. So even when you were getting these parts where they were doing their own ditties or whatever, they still had these little songs they would sing to themselves or something like that. And I did not know, I mean, I knew it had Kelly Clarkson and Nick Jonas and Blake Shelton. I did not know the rest of the star-studded cast. And I think that just kind of made the movie all more special. It's all these singers kind of banded together to say hey, this is kind of in our industry or in the world today, everybody's going to tell you, that different is bad, but we're here to tell you that different is amazing, and different is special, and different is unique, and different is what makes the world go round, because without different, we all become this monotonous. And Nick Jonas as the villain was, I thought, just such a nice touch, because he's such a happy, upbeat person in life. And so, he lives in Perfectionville, which is where all the dolls that are human quality get made, and they all become a model/architect or a model/lawyer or a model/scientist. They're so pretty. But Nick Jonas teaches them all how to be perfect and get placed with the perfect child. And I just thought the Ugly Dolls, Uglyville, their version of their hometown and their thing was, I agree with you, just the subtle touches that was done there. All the houses were patchwork quilt, and they ate buttons, and they made cupcakes, and they had food fights continuously. Yeah. It was just so adorably passionate and caring, almost like summer camp for optimist.
Yeah, no, and it was so cute. And I actually, like, when I was watching the movie, like, I started to get upset because I felt like they were kind of selling me on this narrative that even though Uglyville is amazing, there's, like, still something better out there for them. And they had to find their child, and they had to find the one. And I was like, I'm not really super down with this messaging right now. But, like, that isn't actually how it ended, and we'll get into that in a second. So I just thought it was just really fun, and it was light. Was it the best kids movie I've ever seen? No. But it kind of didn't need to be. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I would recommend this to somebody who doesn't like super love kids movies. Like, it's definitely a kids movie. So, but if you have kids, like, you're not going to want to kill yourself watching this movie. And I thought, like, from the voice acting perspective, like, yes, include Wanda Sykes in everything.
Oh yes, I forgot Wanda Sykes.
Just do that.
Phenomenal
thing.
In this
because she always just crackles with personality in any of her voice acting jobs. Like, I always love seeing her show up as a voice actor. I think she actually does much better as a voice actor than she does, like, actually on screen.
Yeah, and I think because she has such a unique voice, it's not really doesn't fit what we typically look for in, like, a narrative, like a drama or something like that. So she plays comedies really well. So I think that's why her voice acting goes so well, because she fits any character she gets into. You can tell she's putting her spirit, her personality into the character. And she is, like, the mama caretaker of the ugly dolls. And I really enjoyed that from her. She's like this, like, we're not going to do anything bad. I'm going to watch out for everybody, but I'm always, like, don't do this. But at the same time, like, all right, if you're going to go, I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you. And
yeah.
I really like Wanda Sykes' character has some great one-liners in this, don't get me wrong. But I just thought that the expressions on the doll's face is what I imagine Wanda Sykes actually probably looking like.
Yeah. And Blake Shelton's, I think
he wasn't there enough for me to really...
Yeah, and I think that, frankly, like, a real actor would have brought more to that role. I thought Pitbull is the, like, comic relief, one-eyed dog, like, actually did great. Like, I was like, oh, he nailed his lines. He was funny. Like, I thought he did okay. I'm not a big Pitbull fan as a musician.
Well, and I enjoyed his bilingualism in the movie. Like, he spoke... in different languages continuously. And so, like, it was, even if you didn't know Spanish or what he was saying, it was really nice to kind of see him use that in the movie. And you didn't need to know, because the tone, inclination, and the animation were so good that you, like, felt enclosed with him. So.
Right. And other than, like, the ugly dolls themselves are all kinds of colors because, like, toys. And then, but in, like, the perfect dolls, the, like, human-looking dolls, they definitely made an effort to... show diversity, which is, always welcome, and frankly should be the bare minimum, like, required at this point. But yeah, the voice acting cast, like, really brought that extra element, which, like, just through experience, just by being who they were. And I
thought Kelly Clarkson did an amazing job. I did not think she was the best voice actor in this. I think she did a great job, don't get me wrong. But I thought Janelle Monae probably stole the show for me.
Out from under everybody. Let's not even start there. Yeah.
Janelle Monae, just like, and I don't know if you follow much about Janelle Monae, but this is really kind of something I was looking forward to seeing her in, because it's the first time I've seen her really do something I think that was pushing her comfort zone. Like, I've seen her dance, I've seen her music,
You didn't see Moonlight?
Oh, I did see, yeah. But I guess it was, like, pushing her as something like Anna, like, her voice acting. Like, I've not seen her play a character. I've seen her act. I've seen her, like, but this, like, I was more impressed by her voice acting because the number of takes I'm guessing she had to do for some of those scenes where it's all crazy and she's, like, the voice of reason in the middle of those was just, like, she brought it together and really made the collaboration and kind of was the savior, I would say, of the movie.
Definitely. I mean, I think, so there's maybe, as a non-child anymore, there's only so far, like, relentlessly upbeat and perky can get you. And they kind of wrote Kelly Clarkson's character that way. So, like, every day she wakes up and she's like, today is the day! It's gonna be amazing and I'm gonna meet my child and it's gonna be the best day ever! And I'm like, that that gets annoying fast with me.
Right.
And I actually felt like I did feel Kelly Clarkson did a good job with kind of a thankless role, to be frank. But 100% agree with you. Janelle Monae stole it out from everybody. And
I think she had the most development, though, because she was living in Perfectville with an imperfection versus, like, the Ugly Dolls did not know they were ugly. They thought, that's how life was. They live in Uglyville. They call themselves Ugly Dolls. But it gets into this, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but in-group versus out-group tactics of, like, the Ugly Dolls were perfectly content being quote-unquote ugly. We're happier than anyone in Perfectville.
right.
And that's a little deeper message than I think kids could probably get. But I did think that, so they were always happy to start with until they learned they were kind of rejects or whatever. But Janelle Monae's character in the movie was already living in Perfectville with an imperfection. So she had to, like, struggle with this inner, like, I'm not perfect, but I want to be, so I have to hide parts about myself to be with the in-group tactic.
Well, in that I'm so close.
Yeah.
Like, I'm nearly there. Which, again, from the actual reality of Janelle Monae, you're like, it's really annoying that she can act and sing, and she's beautiful. She's pretty flawless as a human being can be. Like, she's amazing. And one of the things too was, there's a lot of nonsense, which I think is getting overturned about how, like, boys won't watch movies that star a girl. And this movie was, like, absolutely about, like, their journey together. And they have, so the song, let's get into the songs in a second, but Janelle Monae and Kelly Clarkson have, like, a really beautiful duet together that I absolutely loved. I just enjoyed hearing the two of them sing together. I thought, like, their voices blended really well through that duet. And it was just sort of a pleasure to see, like, two women kind of killing it on screen and, like, doing their thing.
It definitely, not to downplay any of the male actors, but, like, I do think that this was a very... not even feminist, but a woman-driven show. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? It's not, I don't know how to say that other than, like, I think they did such a good job that I kind of forgot the male actors were even there. And I think it goes back to your point, like, Janelle Monae brought an animated character and had depth to it, I felt like. Versus Blake Shelton's character, I was kind of like, yeah, I was kind of like you. But, I mean, it goes to speak about how well interconnected agencies, because the same agent who Kelly Clarkson has is the same agent Blake Shelton has. So I'm sure there was some, like, hey, you got to get me another one in there, too.
Yeah.
But I just thought that I agree with the journey. Janelle Monae and Kelly Clarkson's character just kind of took their duet, but their journey together. They were both the ones every step of the way fighting for each other to do better. And, like, it was the subtle things. They weren't outwardly, like, saying, I'm going to make you better, I'm going to make you better. It was, like, telling you, like, I think you look great in glasses. Or I think you look great as you are as an ugly doll. Or I think you are already amazing as you are. Like, it was not, oh, you need to be prettier. Oh, you have to do this to be better. It was like, I love the things about you already. And that was super special to me.
Yeah, and also, like, but if you're unhappy with something, then I'm still your friend, and I'm going to help you get to where you feel like you need to be, like, in a non-judgmental way. It's like, well, okay, I respect the fact that you're unhappy and you want to change. How can I help you as a friend? Like, and agree, like, this isn't a feminist movie. It's like post-feminist in the sense of it doesn't matter that they're girls. Right. It's besides the point. Like, it doesn't make an issue of it. It's not what the movie's about, and it's just really nice to see it not be an issue. Like, no one have to think about it or do some sort of stupid girl power storyline. It's just like they're women or they're girls. Like, they're sort of childlike. And that is a non-issue.
And I think the kind of the naivety of a child approach they took to it, like, children don't care. Children don't care what our skin colors are. Children don't care about our gender or our sexual orientation. Children care about, do you want to play with me?
Yeah.
Can I have fun with you? What do we have in common? And so I think you really capture that in this movie. And it was just kind of great because, and I guess in my head, I'm also assigning some genders too, because the Ugly Dolls don't really have clear gender markers like we would think of between male and female in Perfectionville. But it's just really kind of, I don't know, it was so wonderfully upbeat. It wasn't overly pessimistic. And I took one of my friends, the one I went to see Highlight with. I said, let me help you get better. And he was like, well, that was a much better movie than High Life. And he is, kind of down sometimes. And like, really, he's a realist. I think I told you this last time. He's a realist. And he was like, it wasn't shallow. It wasn't overly pessimistic. It had a little bit more depth. It wasn't like so over the top Pollyanna that you were like disgusted by the time you left the movie. He's like, and I think it's nice. He's like, I don't want to have kids, but I think if I did, kids would be enjoying this. And, we sat in front of a whole row of like a birthday party or something. And it was just really sweet to like hear the kids' reactions. And I think he like kind of got tickled by that just by seeing like the kids were actually getting something out of the movie. Mm-hmm. First, it wasn't like, when we did Incredibles, we talked about there was a lot of action. We had to keep them engaged. We had to keep like lasers going and something new and gimmick. And this one, you really kind of just sat there the whole time and you didn't. There's enough songs to fill it. There was enough plot to fill it. There was also just like this warm, happy feeling the entire time you're watching it. It's very lighthearted, but also gets the message across, I think, that we miss in quite a few kids' movies.
Yeah, and I did think that it was a little bit frenetic for me in parts. There was a lot of like, for lack of a better word, and I don't have... excuse not having the vocabulary of film as well down for animated films, but like spinning camera, quick cuts, like, sort of simulated fast camera movements. Like there was a bit of freneticism in certain parts of the action that I was like, I'm feeling motion sick. Please slow down. Like, but no, it kind of let the story sit. It didn't go into deep tragedy. So I don't know if you saw, there was this thing on Twitter, the other Garret posted where people were saying like people are like kids today are upset about like the Shazam, which I haven't seen, so I don't know what was dark in that, and they're like, look what I went through, and there's like it's like a post like a 4-part pic collage of like E.T. dying, the like Macaulay Culkin dying in My Girl, like Atreyu losing his horse from the Neverending Story. And it was like, oh yeah, and Bambi's mother dying. It was like, oh yeah, 80s kids went through some stuff like in movies. And this wasn't that kind of movie, and it didn't need to be. Like, this is a great, like, you'll pop it in the, DVD player and throw it on for your kids.
But I think it's something they'll watch again.
Yeah, and I think they will. And I don't think it's like, again, I don't think it's the best movie out there, but it's certainly not the worst. The songs I felt were decent-ish.
It's hard to me to like picture adults writing songs for children who normally write songs for adults. Like all the songs were originals.
Right.
And so I feel like it's sometimes hard for me to like, yeah, I agree. The songs are not something you're going to be humming along at the end of every day. And Kelly Clarkson actually changed a little bit of the lyrics and published it as an adult song too. So there's some crossover there. But the songs are, I couldn't tell you a ditty or a run from any of the songs right now. But they were enjoyable while you were there. Yeah,
they were fine. They had that sort of like, sort of pop factory sound. You're like, okay, change the lyrics slightly and you could have just written this for Katy Perry, or, any, the sort of factory production of pop songs these days. It definitely felt like it just came off that assembly line.
Yeah.
Like,
these definitely aren't like, you're not going to hear Let It Go or Moana, How Far I'll Go. These aren't like songs that you're going to know all the words to because you've just heard them 8 million times somewhere else. But these are songs that like your kids bop to, and the kids are like dancing and we're like really enjoying themselves, whether they understood the lyrics of the song or not. Because, it's always hard for, what I know about child development, it's hard for kids to understand lyrics of songs. So you could actually just put a fun beat to it and say watermelon the whole time and kids would have just as much fun.
What I know about child development is I used to babysit in those stupid sing-alongs videos. They love them. They absolutely love them. They would watch them over and over and over again. So yeah, but I do think like we've talked about sort of the heyday of the Disney, sort of resurgent golden age of the Disney movie, which sort of started with The Little Mermaid and more or less ended with The Lion King, like that they're all reproducing. And I was like, Disney hasn't been able to nail a choral number since that day. Yeah. Like I saw Frozen. It's not a coincidence that Let It Go is the only memorable song. Like the rest of them were not very good.
But that's just it. Now I think they write music to fit the movie. They used to write movies to fit the music. Like, they would come up with all these songs and ideas first, and this is where I think what we've lost some animation. I mean, the classic animation, you're hand drawing scene after scene after scene. So you're there, you're thinking about it, you're having to work tons of extra hours humming these songs, getting these characters developed, stuff like that. Versus now, it's done completely on a computer, pretty much, and you're like, somebody draws the original sketch, and then we copy, then we edit, then we, but these kind of realist CGI 3D cartoons, animation, all of it kind of combined now, and I'm like, I really enjoy it. But I think you'll see it again when Aladdin's coming out soon. So, hot tip, Aladdin is probably the only one of these I'm gonna see. Because I love Aladdin, and I know every single word to every single song. Still, the songs are so much fun. But I think you'll see, I want to sing the songs so bad. Kind of like with Beauty and the Beast. Oh, I love the songs, but it didn't fit the live action. You know what I mean? The songs were not meant to be for normal, human behavior. They're meant to be this extravagant cartoon show. And I would argue that they have a very Broadway sensibility. They sound very much like traditional musicals, and no one sort of figured out how to get out of that with, the more modern Disney films don't know their way out. And it's you see Hamilton and you're like, okay, someone put a different structure to this, and I'm sure that will eventually bleed out into what musicals start to sound like. But this one just was let's just go with a straight pop score. No. And that was fine. I found that completely adequate, because what we've gotten is some sort of weird watered down Broadway thing that just doesn't work. Right. Checking my notes, making sure I covered what I wanted to talk about. So I was watching this movie and I was searching for a theme, and it kind of didn't coalesce to me until there's a moment where, like you said, the ugly dolls find out they're rejects. They're defective. They were meant to be recycled. They were never supposed to come off the assembly line for the first place. They're not really welcome into the wide world. And they're like, but we've created this beautiful culture that's just ours and is really amazing. And that we're willing to share with you. We want to share it with you. We love it. We thought we were fine the way we are, and we reject the notion that there's something wrong with us and we need to be fixed. And all I could think was watching this movie was, what a beautiful analogy for deaf culture. And I just thought this is such an interesting analogy to a group of people that when you say you're broken, and I want to get into, there's been a lot of controversy in terms of, which has some interesting history we can get into in terms of deaf people being forced to speak and how they want to operate in the wider world, which there's also there's the Uglyville world, and then there's do you want to pass into the wider world? Do you want to stay in the safety of Uglyville? Different people had different opinions on that, which I thought was really fit the analogy well as well. And I was like, what an interesting, that was the lens I really wanted to look at this movie through. And I don't know if any of you, I don't know if we've discussed it on this show. I don't know. I'm a PhD student currently at Gallaudet University, the only university in the world for the deaf. Really, in the world? So it's the only one that's dedicated to the deaf culture. ASL, American Sign Language, is the primary use of communication on campus. They support a very strong bilingual mission statement. But American Sign Language is the dominant use of mode of communication. So when Nicole was like, oh my God, I want to talk about deaf culture, I was like, oh, great. I can do this all day long. For those listening, I want to make one thing clear, because just because they're named Ugly Dolls and they live in Uglyville and we're going to be relating to deaf culture to that, I just wanted to put a warning out there that we're not calling deaf ugly. We're not calling deaf bad or anything like that. We're using the characters from this movie to make a parallel to deaf culture. So I didn't want that misinterpretation to go out, because I think sometimes people misassociate. Yeah. No, and then this is, like I said, if you see the movie, you can't even come away with that, because Uglyville is just this adorable, perfect thing that you just want to be a part of with all your heart. There's absolutely nothing ugly about the ugly dolls. In fact, the perfect dolls are the ones who are kind of too human-like, to that uncanny valley. They're just creepy. But yes,
Disclaimer made.
So this parallel, I think, actually works really well because deaf culture is beautiful. And for those of you who don't know, American Sign Language and deaf culture is not a translation of English, everybody. There's a difference between big D and little d capital.
I just learned this.
Big D deaf and little d deaf. Big D deaf is deaf culture versus little d deaf will be people who identify as medically or deaf or disabled or whatever their identity is theirs. But big D deaf culture is really important, and it has its own norms, it has its own language, it has its own customs, it has its own, everything that makes up a culture,
right?
It's its own. And there is a big push right now to be like, we want to be recognized formally as a culture and be like, hey, we're here. Because deaf individuals have been out there for, years and years and years. Gallaudet was founded in 1834 by Abraham Lincoln, one of the only schools chartered by Congress in the United States, and is still funded by Congress, which means, yes, unfortunately, Betty DeVoe gets to set our budget currently.
Oh, good.
But it's an interesting parallel. The deaf culture is fine, surviving by itself. They have been there surviving for years and years and years. People who are interacting, engaging, get by completely on sign language alone. It's there, and it's, they're proud. They should be proud. They are amazing people. I mean, I have several deaf friends. I've been involved in deaf culture for quite a while. This is my 5th year in DC, which is the deaf hub of the world. And it's super great because there's a university dedicated to the deaf. People come from all over the world to go to Gallaudet University. Undergraduate and graduate programs both. And it is such a unique university. If you've never stepped on the campus in DC, it is open until 8 p.m. every day. I would encourage you to go see it. It's beautiful. It's large. It's in Northeast DC. And it's just a different concept of what you would think a university is. And everybody's like, well, all universities are the same. Sure, class structure is similar and everything. But just to see interactions between people, the cafeteria at Gallaudet is one of my favorite places to go because you're going to see it's loud but not noisy. So there is a lot of people eating and there's a lot of people signing. And if you want to see like a cultural competency, eating and signing at the same time, I still have yet to master it, but it is like, these guys are pros at it, So I thought it was great that this was like, deaf culture is here. It's this beautiful, rich parallel to what Uglyville is. It's like, this rich, vibrant, proud culture who accepts people when they come to it and really wants to engage with it. And deaf culture started to branch out. It was like, we want to give part of our culture back. We want people to engage with us. So they go to Perfectionville, which I would call hearing culture. And they're kind of like, first they're like, oh, we don't understand, which is the typical response to deaf culture. Like, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean sign language is not just English translated? What do you mean? And I'm like, sign language.
Or like, how can you not know that you're broken?
Right.
Right? Like,
something's wrong with you.
Like, that's clearly something is wrong with, like, I think that's, and that is the approach. Like, there's something wrong with you that needs to be fixed. And I want you to finish your thought, but I want to get into like where deaf culture comes from and why they're so adamant about that. Like, it doesn't come from nothing. I wish I could say it was all just like believing in yourself and loving who you are, but no, like there's an opposition for a reason. But keep going.
No, and I think we can just dive into that. Like, hearing culture is large, has forcefully, and forcefully is the right word, and you can't see, but there's a sign for force, which literally looks like you're pushing something down in sign language. Hearing culture has forcefully oppressed deaf individuals continuously throughout the world.
Repressed, like specifically repressed signing, which then cut deaf people off from everybody. Because it could, there was a movement, and this is so weird, like Alexander Graham Bell was the founder of this movement, which I knew that. I did not realize his wife and his mother were both deaf. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. So I will post all my reading material. I did study up for this podcast. So I thought that was fascinating, but he was also like one of the leaders of saying like, no, we have to force deaf people to talk. If you teach them sign language, it'll be like a crutch and they'll never learn. So then all you left all these deaf people stranded with no way to communicate.
And assimilation is the number one goal of the dominant culture always, is to be like, be more like me. However, ASL is one of the most used languages in the United States other than English. Like, people are like, no, it's like Spanish. Like, there are more deaf people in the United States using American Sign Language than most other languages.
But not only that, you are not the only hearing person I know who knows ASL. Many times people have deaf family members, and so, of course, the entire family learns sign language, right? Like,
hopefully that's the goal.
You can. So I read in the article that I'm going to pass on, like, actually ASL is one of the most studied foreign language, and on universities. So you can take it is a foreign language. Like, you can take it as a foreign language, and many hearing people do. So in terms of assimilation, at least like where we are now, it is true assimilation, where like both cultures are learning from each other. Versus before, when it was like, you have to be exactly like us or you're not accepted.
Right, because we did come from, we can talk about the past 40 years. We can go back further, but let's just talk about the past 40 years. There's been a huge, no hands is a huge movement. So they used to slap deaf people's hands so they wouldn't gesture or speak with them. They forced a lot of deaf, so there's something called deaf oral, which means the person is technically deaf.
Right.
But they are forced to speak. And so this is most commonly what you've heard, people who have, I can't call it a speech impediment because that implies you have to be able to hear to be able to understand, but like what most people would call a speech impediment, that deaf oral voice. But they're forced to be oral, or they're forced to wear systems, hearing aids, cochlear implants, all these like fixes to fix people. And you ask, if I would just go and randomly ask a person, if your kid was born deaf, would you want them to have a hearing aid or cochlear implant immediately upon birth? Almost every parent's going to say yes, because they think that something's wrong, something's different about their child. And that's the sad fact that almost all deaf children are born to hearing parents. We have families that we call deaf of deaf, which is just generation after generation of deaf of deaf of deaf. They marry deaf people, they have deaf children, everybody is deaf. Go back to 6th grade biology when you do the squares of genetic versus recessive genes. But yeah, this deaf culture is beautiful, and it is a small community, which comes with its own implications because, small communities are more in touch with each other, which also means there's more gossip about each other because there's less to know there. But if something happens at Gallaudet at noon on a Monday, by 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. on a Monday, California, CSUN is another deaf pocket in the United States. We'll already know. The deaf community is so small. And, I watch a ton of vlogs. And so a blog, written, a vlog is a video. So it's people signing instead. So I watch a ton of vlogs, and it's like, there's all these discussions and great debates and like, people doing all these wonderful things. And there was this huge movement though, 30, 40 years ago, to be like, let's do 3 things. No hands, oral, C sign, which is SEE, signed exact English, which is people just signing exactly English, using like the and at and stuff like that, which is not, it's not a part of the language.
As I understand ASL, it's more concept based. You don't necessarily say all the like words in between.
So it has, ASL's grammatical structure has no prepositions.
Right.
And it has no gerunds either. Mm-hmm. So your sign is so the same sign for run is just used in a different pace for running. Mm-hmm. Or like I ran last time. So there's no gerund. I'm saying the English words, but like it's the same sign. So I'm showing Nicole like run is this. And then like running is a continuous that. And so there are no gerunds. There are no prepositions. But in English, it'd be like I walked the dog. And in ASL, it'd be like walk the dog I did. Mm-hmm. So you get into there's some interesting grammatical rules, but your hand shape matters and your orientation matters, but it's also your non-manual markers. So sign language has, your eyebrows have to be included in your non-manual markers, your mouth shape. Your eyes have to dilate. And so there's all these other things that are added, which everybody's like, oh, that's so interesting. I just thought it was English. And you're like, no.
Can I ask a dumb question, actually, while we're sitting here talking about this?
No question is dumb.
What do you do for lefty?
You sign with your left hand.
Okay.
So
handedness is not a thing.
No.
Just wondered about that.
So I am right-handed, so your hand dominant is the one that does it, but it's the same sign, just done the other way.
Right. Okay.
Spelling with your left hand is the same because the letters are... So I'm holding up two L, like you've seen the proverbial loser L, right? Everybody just make an L with your thumb and pointer finger. So it doesn't matter if it's forwards or backwards, which is some interesting studies in dyslexia that have been done about this because deaf individuals are more likely to be able to fill in missing gaps. And the faster people sign, the more letters they drop. And so your deaf individuals become very astute at filling in letters. Like it's a crossword puzzle and you're missing letters in between. They know instantly what that means. And it's a skill that takes years and years. But that's with sign language. Sign language, most auditory languages, all other languages other than visual or pictorial, take 3 years to mastery, basically, if you immerse yourself in culture and everything like that. Sign language takes 9 years. It's a muscle motor movement. So one doesn't become fluent and proficient in sign language overnight taking one class. And I support everybody taking some sort of sign language class because you don't know how much it means when you can at least sit there and try. And that's half the battle with deaf individuals.
Well, actually, one time I called a Lyft, and Lyft came up and said, hey, your driver is a hearing impaired driver. Here's the sign for thank you. And so it gave you the app. Well, it was gave me a couple of signs to talk to my driver, which was really cool. And I was like, way to go, Lyft. Who knew this was a thing until it happened? And it's never happened again.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, so fast forward, and I will post a link to this article too about the whole debate in the deaf community around cochlear implants. The sad fact is, no lessons have been learned, and there has been a strong push. So you're right. When parents get cochlear implants by default, the medical establishment, they have a baby and they're like, oh, your baby should have, your baby's deaf, you should have a cochlear implant. But then the medical establishment is telling the parents not to teach their kids sign language because it'll be a crutch and their kids won't learn to talk, which there is A, zero evidence of that. B, in this day and age, can you imagine somebody telling immigrant parents, don't speak your language at home?
Don't use your native language.
Yeah, they did. They for sure did that in the 50s. That is a thing. And everybody was like, no, bilingualism is great. Growing up speaking 2 languages, but somehow ASL doesn't count as a second language in these people's minds. And there was in the interview, there was this great mom who was like, yeah, no, I ignore that and tell my kid sign language. She's like, what if the batteries run out? What if she's stranded somewhere? She's like, I can think of a million times when the implant might fail. And I'm going to, not leave her with a backup? That's crazy town.
And what we know from actual studies and research and development of deaf individuals specifically is that when they get to be high school, college age, they most often want to participate in signing communities, having some exposure to signing communities. Mm-hmm. If you grow up your whole life in a rural area, unfortunately, most often you will be raised with struggles. You will be raised with access to communication. And we see this really impacting now hard of hearing individuals who are exactly what it sounds like. But hard of hearing, you could have one ear that is good, or you could have both ears that are half good, or you could have 70-30 in one ear. You can have different variations of hard of hearing. You may need 1 hearing aid, you may need 2 hearing aids. But a lot of kids raised in hard of hearing environments suffer the hardest cultural impact because they don't fit into either world because they've either grown up speaking and so they have a hard time trying to integrate into deaf culture because they find learning sign language at a later age, the earlier you can learn sign language is much easier because it is a visual motor language, and that is literally what's developing between the years of 1 to 4. So it's why it's a little bit harder for adults. But you have kids who arrive at Gallaudet who have never signed in their entire life depending on their hearing aids, cochlear implant. Wow. And then they get... 3 reactions are pretty typical.
Okay.
1, I'm here for it. I'm going to do it. Sign language is going to be hard, but I'm going to sign for the rest of my life. I really enjoy being a part of a culture that understands me and gets me and my accommodations that I need. Second is I don't feel like I fit in here. I don't feel like I belong. I struggle because I don't fit into hearing culture. I don't fit into deaf culture.
That's a rough one when you come to a place where you're like, this is going to be my people. And then you're like, oh no, this is not my people either.
And then the third most common response actually is just like that apathetic neutral, like I've had to be in the middle my entire life. And this is kind of a parallel. We've talked about sexuality before, but how bisexual I think are that neutral, like I'm part of both worlds, and I want to be part of both worlds, and I want to be able to access hearing culture, and I want to be able to access deaf culture. But I think that's such the unique thing at Gallaudet. No conversation you have at Gallaudet is going to be the same from day to day. I could have the same conversation with a different person. My signing could always be better. Their signing could be better. Or if it's two deaf signing, deaf of deaf signing, perfect ASL, fluid signers, their temperament may be different, just like our English is different day to day. And so let's relate it back to the movie, because I could go on about Gallaudet all day, everybody. This is my soapbox, and I'll get off in a second. But this was such a great way to be like, hey, we're deaf culture. We're beautiful. We are here. We want to share with you as the hearing culture. And then the hearing culture is like, no, suppress it. Conform to us. Be oral. Use C-sign, signed exact English. Use medical devices, technology, FM systems, hearing aids, cochlear implants. And whatever you decide to do is fine. Just accept that and be happy for yourself. I'm not against cochlear implants. I'm not for cochlear implants. I'm all about the person's choice. And I think sometimes parents especially make those decisions for their children way before the children can decide if they want to be part of deaf culture, especially if they're fully deaf, signing only.
So, I mean, the reason I was so wanted to talk about this on this issue on this podcast and to put you under soapbox, frankly. Okay, so I will be totally honest. This is maybe embarrassing, but I'm going to own it with pride. Like, I didn't know about any of this until I started watching the teen TV show Switch to Birth.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a full-on adult. I started watching Switch to Birth. Unbeknownst to me when I started watching it, that this whole TV show was about deaf culture.
Yeah.
And a hearing family, sort of being thrust into it and not having a clue what it was about. So you sort of get their perspective, but you also very strongly get the perspective of deaf people who some of them speak, some of them don't. And all of the intricacies about it. And I think the thing is, though, in terms of assimilation, probably part of it is just a numbers issue, that there just aren't that many deaf people. But I think most hearing people go through their entire lives and have no idea.
Correct.
That there's such a thing as big D deaf culture. I've never had a deaf friend.
I've never had deaf exposure, period.
None. And so it's I hope everybody listening to this who has no idea, there's this, that, there's a world of people who were told they were defective, rejected that.
Are continually told they're defective. This isn't a new idea, unfortunately.
There is a plug I want to make for a Samantha Bee special episode on YouTube as well, about how deaf people are treated by the police. Scary and bad.
It's
scary and bad. But I think a lot of hearing people just don't know about this. So that was part of why I was I've been waiting to get on this. And it's it's such a great story. And it's I love subcultures. Part of going to the movie is just to be immersed in somebody else's world, right? So it's oh wait, there's this whole group of people and there's this whole thriving culture who's no, we've made our own world. You didn't want us, fine. We did fine without you. We made our own thing, and it's beautiful and it's special and we love it.
But at the same time, I want to push back on that. They may be doing amazing without hearing culture, but they're also super accepting of hearing culture.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go the other way.
Absolutely.
Hearing culture is always you need to, can you read my lips? That's a big assumption. And I should have got brought up with the 6 myths. But number, I think 3 is don't expect deaf people to read your lips. That is a very uncommon skill, actually. It is something that you see and you perceive to be very common. Hard of hearing people often have to rely on lip reading to fill in gaps that they're missing. Most deaf people don't care to read your lips because they're not gonna, if you're not trying to sign at them, you're just speaking, it means nothing to them.
Right.
But
Also, don't talk louder.
Yeah, well, that's what I think that's like myth number 5. Like, I need to speak up.
It's like, that's not how it works.
It's the same way we treat elderly individuals. Just because someone is...
Or foreign language.
Correct.
Sometimes you just say English
I agree.
louder.
Like, saying something louder doesn't help. And believe it or not, your visual non-markers, your eyebrows, your constraints of your mouth, and the eye shape, actually, when you get louder, those change completely. So if you try, like... I'm going to just put yelling not in quotes because I think that's actually what we do to a deaf person. Doesn't help.
Yeah, because you unconsciously be signaling anger.
Correct. Well, frustration.
Because it's like intensity.
Anxiety. It depends on the person.
Raise of your voice, yeah. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. That makes a lot of sense.
But also, I guess I should send you my article I wrote for psychotherapists working with hearing individuals. I think it applies to a lot of us. But I think things like Nyle DiMarco, who is a Gallaudet graduate, awesome guy, mathematics major. I always want to like plug their actual majors for people who graduate from Gallaudet, because Nyle DiMarco is an actor. He was on America's Next Top Model and won.
Yeah, he's on the Samantha Bee episode and takes his shirt off, and I'm for it.
He won Dancing with the Stars.
He's hot.
He was in
but also apparently
he's an actor. He's a model. Yeah. But like, I just want to also be like, great. He is very handsome. We all like to look at Nyle DiMarco. Trust me, he's a nice guy. I've met him several times. But he's a mathematics major. Like, I just want to plug, like, he is also an intelligent human who graduated with a real degree. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, what do you graduate with? Deaf studies only? I'm like, there are people who graduate from all kinds of things from Gallaudet.
It's a freaking university.
And I'm not just limited. Like, communications degrees is something that people don't think about from University of Gallaudet. We have amazing theater program at Gallaudet with tons of kids who go on to act in a lot of Broadway plays. Spring Awakening, most all of their cast was Gallaudet graduates. So, like, imagine that. We have, a little fun fact, a Gallaudet graduate who did a business administration degree was the secretary for President Barack Obama. There's a big movement called Deaf Can, because everybody's like, deaf can't do this. Deaf people shouldn't, deaf people can't drive. They can't hear the horns. They can't see. They're more distracted. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Deaf people have less accidents per capita than hearing individuals. Because being
I'm not buying that story.
Being a visual language, we actually pay, well, not we, I don't identify with deaf culture, so I didn't mean to proverbially we. Deaf culture is actually more observant probably when they're driving, but can multitask better, and hearing people can't understand the multitasking better because their brains are literally wired different to be able to multitask.
Hey, they can talk and eat.
Yeah, like visually stunning. So I think it was like the part of like, when you said you wanted to parallel this deaf culture, I thought it, because we both saw it, I think, on Saturday. So I had a whole 2 days to kind of really think about this, and I was like, man, there are a lot of parallels. But the one parallel I thought that was missing is like, Perfectville really never accepted. The villain was kind of defeated, and they like kind of all decided to live cohesively together. But that was not what deaf culture is currently.
No, it's not. But again, so to pick up where I left off a while back about the ending, but the ending shows you can have the wide world and you can have Uglyville too. Like they talk about coming back to visit, when their child goes to sleep. And at some point you assume like the child's going to outgrow the doll and the doll will come back. So they give you this analogy of like, yeah, you are going to have to face the wider world. And not everybody is going to understand or accept you, but you will find the people who will. And you can always come back to your own community when you need to. And I was like, oh, great ending, like the perfect way to put it. And yes, I think Perfectville sort of represented the haters. And those people were never going to be on their side. But they didn't need to be. Like, they're always going to be haters. They're always going to be, unfortunately, doctors who see it as a defect and know nothing about deaf culture and don't even think to say to a parent, hey, this is a beautiful thing that your child was born into. They have access to this great community. Like, they're never going to know that. They're not going to bother to educate themselves to know that. So I guess to me, it's like, that's more realistic. There's always going to be the people who see it as wrong and as a defect. And you don't need those people.
And if you're listening now, Nicole and I are going to own our privilege right now. We are making a podcast for hearing people.
Right.
We did not transcribe that. We aren't planning on transcribing this. I don't know.
And we did talk about it in the early days.
Yeah.
And I would love to. This is ad-free.
Right.
It would come off of my own dime. But if there is a way at a reasonable price or for free that I could share this with your community and your fellow students, like I talked about that from day one. But no, you're right. We're inaccessible.
But if you're listening right now, I want you to check your privilege for a second and be like, I'm in the car, I'm at the gym, I'm riding home from work. Maybe I'm listening to this to go to sleep because Garret bothers me to death and his voice drones on. But you're using a privilege that deaf culture doesn't get. There are a multitude of issues with the deaf culture participating in hearing culture. There's hardly any issues with the hearing culture participating in deaf culture. We have great advancements in technology. I don't want to take away from people who decide to get cochlear implants or hearing aids or FM systems or whatever works for you.
Or hell, FaceTime.
Like,
do you know what a boon FaceTime is for somebody who signs?
I know we're running out of time, but and I was working at the Apple Store when FaceTime first was released, and I cannot tell you, they bought iPads, okay? It's a deaf couple, and I'm still getting emotional telling the story. And we have a table that is specifically set up at the Apple Store to help you with your devices. A deaf couple buys an iPad. Seeing this couple FaceTime from across the table for the first time and watching them both pour down tears as they're signing to each other over FaceTime to be like, we don't have to be in the same room and I don't have to read this off a piece of paper. Because sign language is such a visual language and because your eyebrows matter and because your face matters, your expression, your energy, your spirit, your soul, your entity matters. And to be able to see that on another person's face, especially of the person you love, unbelievable.
Yeah. And I'm sure no one who invented FaceTime even thought.
No, they were
about the deaf community and what that would mean for them. All right. So unfortunately, maybe hopefully this won't be the last time we get to talk about some of these issues. But for now, tying it together, social impact score. I don't think most people are going to read into it what I did, but I still would give the movie a solid, it's a kid's movie. I'm not going to say it's world changing or changing, but I enjoyed it and I thought it had, positive messages, plus was fun. So I'll give it a 4.
Oh, actually, the first time I think I'm ever going to give a score over 5.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to give it 6.5.
There you go.
And besides our conversation of deaf culture, which I really enjoyed, thank you for indulging me, everybody. I really thought that kids could grasp the concept of what was happening. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's often a kids movie gets kids involved that hard.
I agree. So what are your recommendations for the week?
I have several.
As always, I love it. Go for it.
So first, I want to recommend 2 books about being deaf. I want to recommend Journey into a Deaf World by Harlan Lane et al., which I think is really a great, just immersive...
It's nonfiction. Not memoir style.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's a great, just Journey into a Deaf World, kind of talks about the nuances, the myths about deaf culture. It's a little bit older, but I think it's actually really, really important. And then I want to recommend the second book, Deaf Like Me. It's an older book, originally published in 1978, so take that for what it's worth. But it is about account of a hearing parents coming into reconciliation of their child being deaf. And this is a big time when the deaf push was around about everything needs to be fixed and parents who kind of rebelled against that. So I think that's a really, really great one. Mm-hmm. So I want to recommend a really good book to all the parents out there that kind of plays on it doesn't matter who you are and where you come from. Mm-hmm. It's called Not Quite Narwhal by Jesse Sima, which is about a unicorn who thinks he's a narwhal.
Oh, that's so cute.
And it's a really cute book. I'd recommend it to all you parents.
I might have to buy that for some parent friends. Yay.
And it's literally about how a unicorn is raised by a bunch of narwhals and doesn't know he's any different until one day he surfaces on land and finds the unicorns and finds he's part of that. And it's about how he can become part of both cultures as a narwhal and a unicorn. I'm going to recommend an app, which I don't normally do, everybody. But it's called the ASL App. And it is free on your iPhone. It's an eConsult production, everybody. You can see Nyle if you're really into Nyle DiMarco. You can see Nyle. You can buy expansions. But they're know your ABCs, your numbers, universal gestures, handshapes, and the basics are all free. I'm going to submit an article to Nicole. Please
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, please don't. Actually, I don't get paid if it's published or not. It was in an APA journal. It's about what to do with psychotherapists, and I think there's some general good rules in there about what to do with deaf people. The last recommendation I give is not tangible. It is if you interact with a deaf person who identifies as deaf and who signs, because don't label somebody who cannot hear as deaf unless they do.
Mm-hmm.
So their identity is their own, which is a whole different discussion for another podcast. Try and communicate. I don't care if that's writing down. I don't care if that's texting on your phone. I don't care if that is gesturing. I don't care what it is. You don't know the impact that trying has on so many people, and it starts with you.
Awesome. So I'm actually going off topic, although go ahead and watch Switched at Birth. But it's very teen drama. I mean, it was like ABC Family. That's the kind of stuff I like. Hello, I like kids' movies. So I'm going to recommend The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. Really fun if you're like into the sort of Harry Potter, or if you read the Jasper Fforde Thursday Next series, like alternate universe, really fun adventure story. Very cool. You will like it. It's a series. I read the first one, even though I promised myself I would not start a series until I knew the series was over. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. I have to say, like, on a personal front, this episode has been a long time making since I found out that Garret went to Gallaudet. Like, this is something that really, really means a lot to me personally, even though I do not go to Gallaudet. I just really think anytime you learn about a group of people who have their own thriving culture that just goes so hidden, it's so much fun to get to talk about and explore that and let in other people on that. So leave a review for us on iTunes if you liked us. Recommend us to your friends. Our website is moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, and we'll have links to all the things we've discussed, and you can visit our store. And all our stuff will be on Twitter with our tag @MoviesMatterPod, and on Facebook. Check Twitter to find out what movie we're overanalyzing next. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll talk to you next time.